All right, it's time. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our Integrative Wellness and Development podcast. I'm Mike DeLuca. I am your host. I'm very excited, very grateful that you're here. We have an amazing interview tonight with an amazing gentleman. It's the second time I've had him on my show. Very grateful that he's joining us. Very grateful you're joining us. Just want to get some of the housekeeping things done. I'm required to say that this show is strictly for educational purposes only. We do not attempt to say we are diagnosing, treating, or preventing any illness or condition. If you have an illness or condition, we recommend that you see a licensed practitioner of your choice to handle that. The things that we are going to be sharing do not guarantee that you will instantly become a billionaire or you will instantly have all of your dreams come true. Although it could very much lead to some amazing things happening in your life, we are not allowed to make specific claims here. So tonight is all about education, inspiration, cooperation, perspiration, all kinds of things can happen. And very, very happy to be sharing this time with you. At this point, I would like to introduce to you, for those of you who don't know Doug, and most of you probably already know him, but very, very grateful that Doug Marman is here. I've known Doug for many years, known of him for even more years, and very grateful that he's here on the show. Doug, welcome again to our show, and so happy that you're here with us.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. I'm going to put a little introduction here. So yeah, this is what we're doing tonight. We're the Integrative Wellness and Development Podcast. Our special guest is Doug Marman. And what we are talking about is something that we are all going to be really, really interested in. That is how lenses of perception become a bridge between the spiritual wisdom and teachings of Rumi and quantum physics. So Doug is a really apropos person to be interviewed about this. Doug has been writing, lecturing, and leading classes on the exploration of consciousness for over 40 years. He was the chief technology officer for a $1.7 billion division of GE. He is a founder of a technology startup involved with artificial intelligence. Doug is the holder of over 40 patents used in a variety of technologies and has worked as a journalist, business unit manager, photographer, marketing manager, and editor. Doug has also authored 7 books, whose titles include The Hidden Teachings of Rumi, It Is What It Is, The Spiritual Flow of Life, Lenses of Perception, Sumani, The Silent Questions, and The Whole Truth. The Whole Truth and Nothing But the Truth. So with that, we are going to jump into our topic tonight. And I'm going to go with a few questions to Doug. And we don't have to stick religiously to these questions, but I thought this would help us in building this bridge between Rumi spirituality and quantum physics. So Doug, I'm going to start with the first question. What was Rumi's perspective on consciousness and the divine nature and purpose of soul?
Okay. First of all, hello to everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, the question of consciousness is a more of a modern kind of question that we ask. If you go back to Rumi's time, which would be 700 years ago, people don't ask about consciousness too much. Everybody knew they were conscious. Everybody knew they were aware, and that so people didn't talk about it much. It just was what it was. As Rumi put it, it is what it is. But the thing is, his perspective, though, I guess you would, in some ways, you'd think of as a mystic, someone who really delved deeply into understanding things. His father was a spiritual leader, and he he taught Rumi to learn from all walks of life. So he had a very advanced education and everything known at the time, but he also had lots of spiritual teachers that he learned from directly. Although his life was dramatically changed when he met Shams-I-Tabrizi. And Shams actually totally transformed Rumi's life, although Rumi was already well known as a spiritual teacher before that. But his life really dramatically changed. But you could say that he had an ability to talk to all people. He had kings would come to sit at his feet when he gave talks. He'd have some of the leaders in the communities in his area, and he had the average people from the community. Anybody was welcome, and they all came. So he had quite a group. His perspective on the way he saw like the divine. He spoke as a poet, and he used poetic ways of describing it. So one moment he might describe the divine as as God, and think of it, use the word he, and then he might call the divine the beloved, and think of it as her. And so he had all kinds of ways, but he took them to all be poetic intent, not literal, not to be understood with the mind, but to be understood with the heart. It's interesting, while I was getting ready and thinking about this talk here, I'm leading a class on some of the Rumi books I've made. And just this last week, we ran across a discourse that we were talking about, and I just wanted to read it because it fits so well in. It's really short, but this is from it is what it is. This is the book. You can see it. You've seen the cover, and it is his discourses. And this is from Discourse 64. He says, "Every science learned in this world through research and experiment is the science of bodies. The science acquired from crossing the portal of life is the science of soul. To see the light of a lamp and a fire is the science of bodies. To burn in that fire and lamp's flame is the science of soul. Everything experienced is the science of soul. Everything based upon knowledge is the science of bodies." So he's telling you a lot about his perspective just in those terms and the way he sees it. And I really, not only the fact that he's using the term science here in these what he's saying, but that he clearly shows that everything that is based, all of our wisdom, our understanding that's based on experience, is the science of soul. And that brings you right close to where the heart of everything he taught. You learn from experience, including inner experience, spiritual experiences, whatever, spirit experiences that move you. The ones that really move you, they each gain some understanding. That's the science of soul, through experience. Not from so much what people have told you. You can read, and the value of reading is it stimulates you. You want to know more, but you really need to know it from your own experience. Then you know it. Before then, it's hard to say what you really know. He was considered a Sufi in his time, and Sufis were well known for talking in very mystical forms and indirectly and poetically. There was a number of famous poets who were Sufis. And so he often would, talk about a Sufi view of this, and he'd compare it with other views. This is the way an average person might look at this. This is the way people who are critical of this would say. But the Sufis have a different perspective, and he'd give this whole deeper way of looking at it that I found remarkably close to my own understanding and awareness. It was surprising to see. The thing about it is it's most interesting. First of all, it's hard to find writings from hundreds or thousands of years ago that are really, truly, who they're from. They're not just passed down and you're not sure who actually wrote them. I'll give you an example. The Tao Te Ching is famous, and everybody thinks they know who the author is, but the author's name simply means wise man. And actually, the Tao Te Ching was not written by one person, but actually by a series of people over time. And so it varies on what section you're reading and who the author was, that sort of thing. But they've been pretty well preserved, those writings, for a long, long time. Rumi actually, his words were written down. His poems were spontaneous, and somebody wrote them down. And then his discourses that he gave were also written down by somebody. And then, before they were published, he looked at them and reviewed them. So they're fairly accurate to what he wanted to say. But his perspective, the thing that's different about Rumi is you feel the wisdom in what he's talking about, but you feel like you're missing something too. That was my first experience with reading him. I said, I know there's so much here coming through, but I don't feel like I'm fully getting it. I feel like there's a veil in the way, and how do I get this veil out of the way? And as I talked about in the last interview, I spent decades going through his stuff over and over till I felt like I finally was seeing it as he was seeing it. And it turns out that ended up becoming the key for me to understanding quantum physics. And that's the mind-blowing part, because you talk about Rumi on one hand, and you talk about quantum physics on the other hand, and there's such a gap between them. It's bigger than the Grand Canyon that Al is sitting in front of there. The gulf between the two is like immense. It's like everything. It's like hard to imagine you could have a bridge across that. But for me, in my personal experience, it started out with me having lots of spiritual experiences, and I was trying to understand, how do I know when a spiritual experience is real? How do I know it's not just my imagination, or I'm fooling myself, or it's something I want to experience? And over time, I got to move into lots of different states of consciousness and find out what the reality of those states was by going back and repeating, having experiences over and over and comparing them with other states of consciousness. And it took many, many years, but after a certain point, it started to make sense in a way that I say, this is real. I know this is real because I have experienced it through many different senses, not just one. It's affected my life. It's changed my way of, for example, I became an inventor, and I used my inner experiences to find inventions. So I was using it in my life. When I was learning to write, I found I could be inspired, and that inspiration came through from the inner. And I was writing things down and say, where is this coming from? I couldn't have written this a minute ago. I didn't know this a minute ago. How does that happen? How does that work? But after when I had that experience enough times in enough different ways, I began to say, okay, now I can finally trust that this is real. And I think I understand some of these things. But it wasn't a mental understanding. It was an understanding like you get when you master a craft. When It's more like you learn a skill and you get good enough at it. You say, okay, I know how to do this. This is something I know. Um, but that doesn't mean you can exactly pass it on to somebody else, right? Uh, it's one thing to know something yourself, and it's something that's gained from experience, especially. But that's the sort of thing that's very hard to pass on. And so Sufis, as Rumi was, they have a saying for that. They call it taste, and that is they use the word taste. So because when you taste something, you can't pass that on to somebody else. Somebody has to taste it themselves to know what you're talking about. So, so that is exactly the same sort of thing. But what I learned through going through my own, trying to understand spiritual experiences I was having and how they were real, and in a different way than it's something a physical is real, but it still has a reality of its own. And how is it real? That time it took to go through that, I realized I had learned how to learn something new. And the Sufis have a saying for this. It's learning how to learn. And so the idea is I went through this process, which was all done without the sort of process you use when you're learning something in a school or reading a book. That's all, well, as he said, that's knowledge, and that's the science of bodies. The science that comes from experience is the science of soul. So this fits very closely in with what I had learned. And a lot of it came from my trying to learn and understand Rumi. But then I thought, okay, I started to take on different roles, different jobs, different careers in different industries, completely different. And I found that having learned what I learned through my spiritual experiences, I could learn and pick up a whole new field very quickly because it was easier to learn something physically new, even a new skill, than it is to learn the spiritual reality, because you have no physical things to rely on when it's spiritual, right? You don't know where is the reality? What isn't the reality? You can't believe anything anybody tells you. You really have to find it out through your own experience before you really know it. Well, if you're learning a skill, you can watch somebody else doing it. You can just start, trying to learn that from what they do. You can learn. Anybody can learn to play a musical instrument. It just takes time, but you have something physical you're doing in the process, right? Learning something spiritual, you're like afloat out in the middle of the ocean with no sense of where you are and where you're going, you know? So it was a challenge, but so from learning how to deal with consciousness and the inner states of consciousness and that sort of thing, it shows you how to learn anything. It really does. So I decided to take on a challenge. I thought, okay, it looks to me. So this is, I'm now acting as a scientist. I'm proposing a theory that learning through spiritual experiences helps you learn how to learn anything. And if that's the case, then I wanted to run an experiment. I wanted to run a test. I wanted to make this as difficult of a challenge as possible. So I thought, okay, then I'm going to try and learn something that is notorious as being very, very difficult, if not impossible to understand. And that was quantum physics. In fact, the leading physicists will tell you no one understands it. In fact, Feinstein, one of the best teachers of physics, he says, you may wonder why in this class I'm not teaching you how to understand quantum physics. He says, because nobody understands it. So stop trying to ask, why is it this way? Why is it that way? If you try and ask those questions, you can lose your mind and never return. So I thought, well, okay, is this more difficult than learning spiritual experiences? Is this more of a challenge? So I dove into that. And one of the things I had learned that was important is, is how do we learn a new lens? Find a new lens. A new lens is when you can see something and it makes sense to you. Um, so it's surprising that if you don't have a lens for something, you can't see it. It makes no sense. It might be something confusing to you. And there's lots of good examples, but I'll tell you one from when my own grandson was around just 1.5 years old. We were outside, and the sound of a jet going overhead was going, and you see his eyes light up, and he's hearing a sound, and he had heard a kind of sound like before, but he had no idea what. And I realized, oh, he was hearing the jet. So I took him over and I pointed out the jet, and he goes, now he had associated the sound with something. Now he knew that was the sound of a jet. It was going through the air. That's what he had been hearing. And so that kind of thing, it clicks. And when it clicks, then the next time you see it, it's not surprising to you. It's not confusing to you. You don't know, you don't feel like it's unknown. You know it. In fact, you start to ignore it. You know, if that sound of the jet is going by, most people just ignore it, unless it sounds like it's coming really close to your house, and then you'll notice it. It'll jump out at you. So in that case, you're jumping from one lens to another lens. Or here's another example. If you go to work and you're working with your coworkers, you adopt a lens, a approach that's suitable for that relationship you have with people at work. But if you come home to your children and they're young children, or you're just visiting with somebody else who has young children, you adopt a different lens. Your voice, the way you talk changes, the way you feel changes. You're trying to reach out to somebody. It's a very different situation. If you go to an audience and there's perhaps a concert, or it's a play or something, and you're amongst all these strangers you don't know. Once again, you switch your lens, you change lenses. So we've learned how to do that. We change lenses of perception all the time. But when it's something we don't understand, it means we don't have a lens for it. Then we go through a very strange situation. And the situation is you're trying to understand it, but how do you? How do you find a lens? And it turns out you can't find it with your conscious mind. You have to find it with experience. It comes to you unconsciously, and it just clicks when it does. Now, in my book on lenses of perception, I offer a really, I thought it ended up being a perfect example. It was an experiment that was run back in 1886, if I remember it correctly. And this person who he asked a question. If they had just discovered that the way the eyes work, they have a lens on the front, and it inverts and turns everything left to right backwards on the back of the eyeball. So everything we're seeing is in a sense upside down and backwards. But yet, we don't see things like that. We see everything right side up. It doesn't feel backwards. It feels right side up. So he wondered, what if I construct a set of lenses, which he did use pyramids, a pyramid glass, and he used it to invert and flip your vision from left to right. And he decided, now, if I wear these lenses and never take them off, or never look at anything without those lenses on, what will happen? Eventually, I learn how to flip it to see it right side up. Will eventually, Well, I eventually see it right side up. And he went through this experiment. And the first few days of it were grueling. It was just, he was like, his stomach was upset. To look at everything was confusing. He would go to wash and reach for the soap, and his hand would be totally in the wrong direction. He thinks he's looking at the soap, and his hand's going the total opposite direction. It's totally missing where the soap is. And then he starts to get up and try and walk, and he realizes everything's moving, but nothing's making sense, and literally feeling he would lie down and cover his eyes because it was so difficult. But he tried to force himself to go through this. And the first few days were really, he was a total sense of confusion, and he did not know what to do about it except for just to go through it. And after the third day, he started to get a sense, but then things would go wrong. If he reached down to something near his foot, he would reach for the wrong foot. But then he learned if he tapped the foot that was closest to it, then he could just reach right down and get it. So there's funny, strange things happening. He had a strange sensation. Now he puts his hand over his head like this and goes back, all the way back to the back, but it looks like it's going through his stomach because it's upside down. So he feels like he just pushed his hands back through his stomach. That's the feeling he had, because that was the old lens. But he began to sense over time that he was seeing two different lenses. He could see the old way, or he could see the new way. And the new way took time. And then he discovered he had a friend over, and his friend was throwing pebbles. And he said he got used to where he was seeing him throw it. It was making sense. But then the pebble was landing on the wrong side of his sound hadn't been adapted. His vision was adapting, but his sound hadn't. And he had to learn his sound. And then he learned another thing. If he held a stopwatch in his hand and it hung down, it looked like a balloon floating up in the air, right? But he felt the weight of it. So the gravity pulling it down gave him another sense to use, and that told him what was down. And so he was integrating all of his senses. And it was only after he had done that suddenly it got to the point where he could do anything. He could go anywhere and do anything. And basically it felt like everything had flipped and he was seeing everything right side up. So that itself, first of all, when sometimes scientists like to say, it's easy to be fooled. It's easy for us to be fooled by illusions, by all kinds of things that can fool us. What that experience shows you is how amazingly able we are to see truth as it is, even in spite of all these things wrong in the way. We see through all those things eventually with enough experience. So that was interesting. But then what happened is his study became famous. And lots of people around the world were trying to duplicate it. And what they found out was some of the people were having the same results, but not everybody. Sometimes people were not able to flip and invert it. And one person wrote a paper saying it's all a myth. None of it's real. We had 10 people we went through for a whole week. Not a single one of them, had corrected their vision, was able to correct their vision. Not a single one of them. So he claimed it was all a myth. It was all just made up. But what he had been doing was every day he sat them down and he went through all these little tests, scientific types of tests. Can you see this? Do you know this? Can you look at this? He's going through all this stuff. Now, what you're doing when you run those kind of scientific tests is you're being objective, right? You want to be really objective and see these things objectively. And it turns out, this lesson was learned from somebody who ran the longest experiment with inverting lenses. He did it for 4 months. And he had people learning all kinds of different skills. And he started the same way. He started, after they had made some progress, he started running these tests to see how their eyes were moving and how, making these objective tests. And he found that as soon as he started doing the objective tests, they lost progress. They weren't able to do what they had been able to do before he started those tests. He said, it's very confusing. Why would this happen? Why is this going on? He had people that were learning to fence, sword play. And so that takes a lot of skill, especially if you're working with somebody who, is very good at it. It's a lot of instinctive moves you have to learn. You have to know how to move exactly where they're moving, even if you're using your lenses are suggesting it's backwards or forward. So they got good enough. They could do those things. But if you start asking them questions like, so what exactly are you seeing? Where is the tip of your blade when you see it come? And when I don't know. They suddenly lost. They lost their lens and went back to the old way, and they suddenly couldn't fence anymore. So what the heck's going on? And he had to run experiment after experiment, and he finally realized as long as the whatever they were doing was natural, instinctive, then it was fine. They could have that lens. But as soon as they started to think objectively and critically, like a scientist does, it broke the lens and it made it difficult, almost impossible for them to adapt. So now this is an interesting thing. What this is suggesting that the lens science uses is a different lens than we use to learn a skill. And it's a different lens we learn to, especially to learn anything that's new. You can't rely on objective thought. It gets in the way. That's the lesson from that. And it really is quite a remarkable thing it's showing. Now, if you're dealing with spiritual experiences, there's no objectivity. There's nothing objective to have. You can't use that. So you have to learn it through experience. That's the only way you can learn it. And so that whole thing about lenses showed me that the way a lens is learned is subconsciously, and it's learned naturally. And you can see children at the youngest age, like when they're just learning how to walk or they're learning how to talk. You can't give them a book to them to learn instructions how to walk or how to talk. They have to learn it through trial and error. They have to learn it by doing it. And one of the things that also got discovered about the lens testing, another person came along and said, everybody else was trying to say, what is it that is happening that's causing this lens flipping, that is correcting lenses or whatever? And people were not coming up with any good answers that made sense. It wasn't. So he asked a different question. What are the people experiencing when this happens? Once again, he's bringing it back to experience. And one of the things he discovered was it wasn't their sense of upright vision that was correcting. It was their sense of feeling that they're in the world and a part of the world, which required all their senses. And so if you look at a movie, for example, it could be science fiction. It could be totally unreal in anything you've ever experienced. But if it's well done, you feel yourself there and you're in it and you're involved in it, right? Now, sometimes the acting is not quite right. So it throws you off a little bit. It breaks your lens. And you're just sitting there, this is silly, because you're not there, you're not in it. So it's the same thing with fiction. Good people who are writing fiction books, you feel like you're there. It pulls you in. You're a part of it. And other person, they can't portray that as well. Well, one of the things that's different about a good fiction writer is they know the characters have a life of their own. And they can't just tell their characters what to do. The characters take on their own direction. The story starts to develop as they're writing it. That's how real it is for the author. And when the author is having that sense of reality, so does the reader. the reader then feels like they're in that world too, because it's that real. Now, what they're doing is bringing something through from the inner to the outer, something that may not even exist in this physical world, but it exists somewhere inwardly. And so that's a whole different set. So these are all the lenses, but now to bring it back to Rumi. I had gone through all that and learned these things about lenses and how we learned lenses. But when I got to quantum physics, it literally made no sense at all. And a lot of physicists say there's no way to understand quantum physics because it's nothing like the world we live in. And it certainly seemed that way when I first started diving into reading all these things. It was like, wow, it makes no sense. And if I had any dreams about it, it was how confused I was. That was the dreams were showing me. I'm confused. I have no idea what's going on here. But then I started to have some dreams that did make sense. I had a dream that I was in the quantum world, and I noticed that if I changed the way I looked at something, I changed my lens, the world changed. If I took shifted my perspective, the world changed. It wasn't just my perspective that was changing. It was affecting the world. And I immediately knew, okay, this is a quantum physics dream. I've had enough experience with my dreams. I knew what it was related to, but I began to, in my dream, I ran this test. Okay, I can keep shifting. And if I keep shifting, I'm keep changing the world. But then I noticed in my dream, I'm noticing something else. How many times I changed things in my dream by shifting things, they went back to their normal way of behaving sooner or later. They just started going back to the same. I couldn't direct them. I couldn't control them. I could just kind of shake things up. But eventually they go back to, so what was causing them to go back to these patterns they were taking? What was directing them? That was the real mystery. And as I'm going through that, little by little, my dreams started to make more and more sense. And then I suddenly began to realize, wait a minute, what they're doing, what's affecting them is exactly the way Rumi was teaching about. He's teaching about it through relationships. It's relationships that affect things invisibly. People, when we form a relationship, we have a friendship or a father or a mother to somebody else. The relationships we have exist between us. They don't belong to one person or another person. They're a shared experience. And the shared experience, when you have a real relationship with somebody and they show you that they agree, it becomes real to the both of you. But it may not be real to anybody else, and nobody else might see it. It's private. It's a private state of experience. And that was what was going on at the quantum level. That's what's happening. And that's the thing that makes sense of it. These particles were acting in such strange ways because they were having shared experiences. So that itself, I said, well, my God, that's what my dreams are showing me now. And it does kind of make sense, but how could that be? How could it be that things at the quantum level could be acting that way? Well, I began to realize, well, there was only one thing that made sense. One thing I could think of that made sense, and that was the particles were sentient in some way. They had to be sentient. So I call this lens, this relational lens, when you talk about it, I call it second person lens. Because when you're writing a letter to someone you love, you'll write, dear, so-and-so, I wish you were here. We say you. We're speaking to you. That perspective is a second person. That's called second person. We know objectivity that science uses is third person because in that case, we are like acting like we're outside and we're not involved, right? So we're not involved, meaning we have no relationship with what's going on. We try and make ourselves detach ourselves from what's going on, not let the relationships affect us. And the first person lens is what you see, what your experiences are. We know first person from our own experiences. And if we do something, we know we've done that. So that's all first person. So those three lenses, it turns out they all work at the quantum level. They're all involved with what science is studying as well. Now, anyway, I've crossed this bridge that seemed impossible to cross. So I think I'll turn this back to you, Michael.
Yeah, you've given us so much to think about and brought so much clarity. I'm thinking back to Rumi understood that where our attention goes and where our intention goes, our energy flows, and we connect at a higher level to where we can begin to experience that intention and attention at a higher frequency, right? An inner dimension. He understood that. They all did. The masters all understood that. And it's interesting how the experiments in quantum physics show how when there is attention and intention, particles go from pure energy wave to formed particles. And so quantum is proving, in that laboratory setting, that our relationship with the field, our relationship with spirit, our relationship with the force, whatever it is that we want to call the all of everything, there is an opportunity for us to consciously interact with it and consciously create a reality for ourselves. We know we can create a reality for ourselves in the inner worlds through our imagination, through our contemplation, through our prayer, whatever tools that you use. But isn't a different lens when we shift to saying that life is things that just happen to me, to then if I put my attention and my intention and my energy and my focus on something, I can create something for myself that is positive. I can also create something for myself that is not positive. In other words, I can create better health. I can create disease, right? So what is that lens that we shift from being the effect of everything to recognizing we are actually have the power of being the cause? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about being the effect, you are actually being an observer,
Yes.
watching something happen to you. So
Yes.
that's the objective lens. That's the third person lens. You've stepped out of your life to look at what's happening to you and you see it happening to you. But what the observer you are, is not exactly soul. It's more like the mind. And what's
Okay.
happening to you is not exactly you as soul. It's just happening to your body. So that's all the science of bodies, as Rumi called it. That's not the science of soul. Science of soul comes from what you experience when you're involved. And remember this thing about the lenses. When they click, it's when you're involved in the world you're in. When you're fully involved in that world, then you have a lens for that situation. That if you and every situation is different, you know. Um, but that's when you learn your lenses. So it's involved. You have to be involved. You need that relationship with everything. That's what makes you, that's when the lens clicks. That's when you get it. That's when it becomes real for you. Yeah. So that's the second person lens that you're using in that case. Now, the first person lens is you may be feeling things, and you may be, but the thing that you changes your perspective is when you're involved. You're not just observing life, you're a part of life. You're not just seeing something happening. You're involved. And when you're involved, that means your relationship is changing the story. You're writing your own story. Because what you're experiencing, remember, change your lens, everything shifts. But when you're in a relationship, that's the thing that guides everything. That's the thing that ends up guiding things where they go, where they are. So if you find a way to have a good relationship with whatever you're experiencing, you're changing from being just the victim or observer to being actually writing, the co-author of the story that's happening because you're involved.
Part of that is trusting, and there's the story many of us know about when Shams first encountered Rumi at the fountain. And Rumi was there with one of his students, and he had all of the books, and he had all of the scriptures, and all of these wonderful, writings that he was teaching from. And Shams went over and threw it all into the fountain, and tried to explain to him that we will never have true wisdom, right? We will never know life. We will never know the divine. We will never know. We won't find it in books. We won't find it in mosque. We won't find it in church. It can only be found through the personal experiences and within the place of the heart, right?
Yes.
We must go within in order to truly experience that. And it's fascinating how we connect that with the brain. But we were talking how historically there was, when the first explorers came in their galleon ships, and they landed really just 100 yards or so offshore from these indigenous people. They sat there for a week, and the indigenous people were fishing, and they were walking the beaches, and they were interacting with their environment. But because their minds and their brains did not have the lens, they did not have the programming, the experience programmed into their consciousness, they were looking right out there, and they could not see the ships because there was no way of grokking that. There was no way of understanding that, right? Until they came in their little ships and went ashore, and all of a sudden these strange beings appear on the shore, and it's like, where did you come from? Well, our ship's been out there for a week. So, but they didn't have that inside of their consciousness. So they didn't have the experience to trust that, what they were seeing. Shams was talking about how the only way we can develop that true wisdom is trusting our connection with the divine. And like you said, build a relationship, a consistent daily relationship that we can then begin to not only trust the divine, but we begin to trust our ability to interact and know what our relationship is with the divine, right?
Right.
And then that moves into when we begin to trust ourselves and our ability to create the vision of what we want, who we want to be, what we want to experience. We still have to have that relationship with ourselves to trust that we do have the ability to do these things. So I find that fascinating that the necessity of building those relationships and also trusting the experiences we're getting to facilitate the new lens.
Yeah. 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 When we're talking about like spiritual or inner experiences,
Mhm.
one of the things that's interesting is that we can experience something in an inner world like a visitor would experience something. But when you form relationships with the beings in that world and you're actually working with them, you change from being just a visitor to becoming a citizen. And suddenly the reality becomes far more real too. And it changes. It changes the way, it changes your physical life. So you know the reality of what you're doing is because when you see how it changes your physical life. For example, I had to learn how to write. It took many, many years over time. And I found the inspiration coming from the inner. And it was only when I formed a relationship with the muses or the sources of that inspiration did it really become so real to me that I could count on it. I'd sit down, I knew I was going to start, I would go right into that state and I would be able to work from that. And I was bringing something from the inner into the outer by doing that as a practice. Well, as soon as I started doing that, it changed my physical life completely. Completely changed.
Do you see a connection between when we go to have an experience? Now, you've talked about first we visit, right, a place of consciousness, an inner place. We establish communication and then relationship. But isn't the next level taking what we are experiencing and finding a way to bring it into a way of creating value? Because that's what I've found is I can get all kinds of things and experiences, but when I take that and say, I'm going to take this into my life and I'm going to create something that's going to bring value to others, right? Myself, family, the people who watch the podcast, the whole dynamic changes and the strength of the relationship between inner and outer is incredibly stronger. And the ability to manifest what was received inwardly happens faster if I'm creating value with it versus if I'm just selfishly doing it because I want to have the experience, right? Can you talk a little bit about how we bring value and how that changes the dynamic?
You're hitting on something that I've been exploring lately because I wanted to find how easy is this somebody can learn this as a beginner. How easy is it to learn? And so I actually went into the inner and had visited some of the muses that I had been working with. And I found that they lived in a community.
Mm.
And they actually had a name for this community. They called it a museum of creativity. And they insisted that the word museum came from them, the muses. The word museum. And so it was kind of a fun experience. But one of the things they made clear is they only worked with beings like in physical who were wanting to take something and share it with the world. If they were just doing it for themselves, the muses would eventually give up on them or leave them. They could only be involved if they were sharing with somebody who was going to do something with it, was going to, like you say, make it of value to others, not just to themselves. Now, that thing that got me interested. So then I asked them, well, how about you? Do you have muses? And they said, yes, absolutely. And they looked, so in this case, the muses I was visiting were on what's called the astral plane, the world just beyond the physical. They were looking up to the world beyond them. And they had muses, and they too needed to be involved with some work that was of value. So they knew they had learned this lesson, and they knew that was critical. When somebody, if you just start practicing by sitting down like 10 minutes a day writing, it may not come at first, but if you're committed and ask the muses for help, they'll come. And if you keep doing it every day, and you start sharing it, you start using it in some way, they will actually have an ongoing relationship. But they don't show their faces. That's one of the things. They hide their faces because they want it to be as much of a personal experience for you when you're having this kind of inspiration. Yeah.
I've found the greater number of or greater amount of wisdom that has entered into my world and into my life is not so much the wisdom that came to me, it was the wisdom that was coming through me. And as it was coming through me to share or to give or to solve a problem that was going to benefit somebody, I was learning as it was manifesting. I was learning as it was coming through to deal with the situation. And and many times I was as surprised as the people who it was coming through for. And that's really inspired me every day to look at, okay, today, how can I be of value not only to spirit or to the muses or the teachers and the people that are in my world and in my life every day? How can I bring that value? Um, it inspires me to put on sharper glasses and watch during the day what's going on, because if I don't do that, I miss the fact that, hey, something's coming through you. It's not something you may have thought or, had a real clear picture of what it was going to be. I found that that's usually the case. What I think it's going to be or want it to be, it comes out different of what it wants it to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lens there that we need to learn to trust and use to be more aware and conscious of when this is coming through. And how does that fit in?
Yeah. If you think about the nature of a personal relationship,
Yeah.
is you can't control it. It has a life of its own. And when you are really working well together with another person, and you're basically like in sync, aligned, working together, you're changing the way you see them, and they're changing the way they see you, and the way they see you changes the way you see yourself. So everything is changing. It's fluid. It's not something that can be controlled. Nothing from the outside can control it. If two people get together and they're married or they have a relationship that's very personal, they can basically, if they agree together that that relationship is so important that nothing on the outside world will ever interfere with that relationship, then nothing will. It is that powerful. And this is why it's so important at the quantum level. It ends up being the thing that drives everything. Everything happens in this world through relationships and personal relationships in specific. That's the whole focus of life. But so that in a sense, it's like you could say, well, you're trusting, but it's more than that. Rumi would say you're dissolving. Like when you're with another person, and there's real love, a real sense of love, you forget yourself. And it's all about you, the experience with another. And that's what Rumi called seeing with the heart, was when you're doing that. And that's why, as I read earlier, he said, everything, what do you say? To see the light of a lamp and a fire is the science of bodies. To burn in that fire and lamp's flame is the science of soul. When you dissolve, when you completely lose your sense of self in this experience, then that is when you're truly moved, and that's when you become, like I say, this stuff flows through you. It's flowing through you, not just to this one other person. Because when you have a relationship with somebody that's personal, that flows out to the world. and that changes the world. And then the other step that comes from this, and you were just mentioning that, is that you can also not just be doing it for this physical world, but the world of the beings, the muses, or whatever's inspiring you, spiritual teachers, spiritual leaders, whatever, wherever your source is coming from that's coming to you, if you're also involved with helping them, then it expands even on that world, not just on the outer world. It becomes something that actually changes in the inner worlds as well. Changes the inner worlds, literally does.
I'd like to stop for a minute because for the folks who are joining us, I want to just share with you where you can get information on Doug's books if you don't already know how to get there. There's two websites here. One is spiritualdialogues.com and the other is lensesofperception.com. Spiritual Dialogues has all of Doug's books, his current books. Highly recommend you go to spiritualdialogues.com, check out these books. I have a bunch of them in my bookshelf now, and we've done, we've already done an interview last year about the two Rumi books. Today we're focusing on Lenses of Perception. But do yourself a favor, and also the folks that you know and love, go to this website, Spiritual Dialogues, check out the books. And then if you want to delve deeper into Lenses of Perception, go to lensesofperception.com. Also, you've received a link. I put it in the chat. It is a link that you can use to download the first 3 chapters of Lenses of Perception to hold you over while the book that you buy gets delivered. Also, for those of you who are interested in getting a free copy of Doug's book, if you make a minimum donation of $10 to the charity of your choice, and send me a copy of that receipt, I will send you a book I purchased from Doug to you at no cost to you. I will ship it to you. Just, letting the love flow. And I've already had 3 people take advantage of it. So if there's any of you other folks are interested in getting a copy, make a $10 donation to one of your charities and I will ship you the book. So at this point, Doug, if it's okay with you, I'd like to open up to questions. These folks have been really patient. I can't believe an hour has already passed. So folks, to handle everyone who has a question, you know that on the bottom of your Zoom toolbar there is react and then raise hand, raise your golden hand. If you would be kind enough, if you have a question for Doug, I'm going to be quiet now and let you ask your questions to Doug, and Doug will respond to you. We'll call on you one at a time based on raising that golden hand. So it'll bring a little bit of order to this. So with that, let's start with the questions. Who'd like to be the first to ask a question of Doug? Raise your golden hand and I will call on you. Then you can unmute and you can ask your question. And again, these are asking for questions. And I know many of you may have stories or things you want to share, but we have a lot of folks here who want to interact with Doug. So let's keep it to a question. So who's first? Well, actually, I already asked a question. So who's second? Who's going to be second to ask a question? All right, Amanda, you are second, so you can ask your questions. Go for it.
Yes, what was the experience of the researchers when they took the glasses off after weeks of wearing these glasses?
Very good question. One of the things that people doing the research had was fears of what they were doing. Could this damage their eyesight? Could it damage their brain? Could they be affected? Because they were having really weird experiences. I mean, in my book, I go and describe some of the experiences they had. They literally started seeing things that were just didn't make any sense at all while they were until they found the right lens, until they switched. So it was really bizarre experiences. Well, they ran tests on these people that had gone through these experiments, and they found that after they had been through this, they got to where their lenses flipped. They found that they were scoring higher on learning exercises, learning tests. They were better at learning. They had, and then not only that, a year later, 2 years later, they could still switch back to the old lens or the new lens. They could switch back and forth. What they had learned was how to learn. And it was helping them learn how to learn anything. It was fascinating. Totally surprised everybody. Was not what they expected at all. It turned out that they were actually better off having gone through that. Yeah, it's like learning another language. It can be very difficult, but you feel like you've really accomplished something, or you're learning to play a musical instrument. These are things that are difficult. Every time you do that, you learn something that helps you better learn how to learn anything. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. One of the other things that's interesting about it is that when you're going through the stages of learning, the stage you go through before you find the lens is a state of confusion. And one of the things I learned was that I had to see the state of confusion as a good sign, because that means my unconscious is learning. And I just needed to trust my unconscious. It would get it. It would figure it out sooner or later. Set aside my thoughts, my thinking mind, which to think about, set it all aside. Just push those aside and you learn faster. Yeah. So that was another interesting part of that.
Wow. Thanks for that question, Amanda. Thank you, Doug. Taha, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Taha, do you have a question for Taha?
Sorry, because I'm watching on TV, so I cannot hear you right now. But my question is do you believe that there are different talents for a spiritual science, like a spiritual, like there are different talents for, let's say mathematics, physical science. But I want to know if there are different talents for spiritual science too.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting question. My experience, and everything I'm talking about here is just from my experiences, but I've learned through my own experiences. But I've naturally seen some people have better aptitudes at some things than others, and including in the spiritual side. And some people just naturally, in fact, as I've gone through and tried to work my understanding through the different inner worlds, I found some people find some of it easy, and some of it, then they reach another one, it's hard, and and I've come to the conclusion that a lot of this, it's not that they as soul have a natural talent from it, but more that they've learned it previously in a previous lifetime, or in some way they came into this world with some experience. Like you can see the same thing with Mozart. I mean, at the age of 3 or 4, he's playing like and creating music. How did that happen? How does that make sense? Well, if you think about the possibility that they lived previously and they had learned that skill previously, then when they come into this world, it makes it easier for them to learn that. But the fact is, we can learn any skill. I think anyone can learn any skill. It comes easier to some if they've learned it before. But that should not get in the way of, because they had to go through the same thing that you would if you've never learned it before. They were at some point started the same way. So in that regard, I think I haven't seen any cases where a person can't learn a skill except when they have too much objectivity, because that makes it harder for them to adapt. makes it harder for them to learn a new skill. You can keep pushing that mind aside, just trusting your subconscious, trusting and learning to love the feeling of being confused. Looking forward, okay, this is a good sign. I'm confused. This is a good sign. It takes practice. It's not easy because your body can be very going through this. Oh my God, what's this? I don't understand it. Your body can react as well, But still, if you learn to set aside the mind trying to figure it out and just trust yourself, then that you'll have more success.
I had a clear example of that when my son was studying for his physical therapy boards. And they give you a study guide and practice tests. And there were 3 sections to it. And the first 2 sections he had no problem with. The third section, every time he looked at the questions, he drew a blank. And he was really panicking. And so, we were talking, a couple of nights before the test, and I said, let's visualize for a moment you're in a library, and because he would study in the library, and let's see there's a bookshelf, right? And there's 3 sections on the bookshelf, right? Section 1, section 2, and section 3. Now, you already know everything in section 1 and section 2, but section 3 is in the same bookshelf. You've studied it, you've learned it, right? You might be having a challenge connecting with it, but it's in there. So if you can accept the fact that if I was able to access shelf 1 and shelf 2, I can access shelf 3. It's all in here, right? But it was surrendering to understanding I've already connected with this. Something's blocking it. It's fear, it's panic, whatever, but it's in there. I've connected already. You've connected already with that information. If you surrender to it and trust, just take that book and put it on the section with 1 and 2. Move it from the 3rd section over to where section 1 and 2 is. And now well, I know everything in that shelf, right? So it's an interesting thing, but it works. It really works.
Yeah. Well, I remember being in cases where I was taking tests and reached a question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't answer this. One of the things I learned was just skip it, go on to the others and come back. Because then I come back and say, oh, now I get it.
Yep.
Because the subconscious needed it. I needed to stop thinking about it. It really does make a difference when you take your mind off it and you trust yourself, like you're saying. Find a way to show, I do know this. It's somewhere in there. Just need to take the pressure off and it'll come.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, who else has a question for Doug? Raise your golden hand from your golden heart.
What we're talking about is similar to what happens when you talk with somebody, and as soon as you leave, you think of, oh, I should have said this. I should have said that. You didn't think about it then, but just give yourself a little bit of time in the subconscious, brings it right to the forefront, and your subconscious has access to huge amounts of information. Yeah, huge amounts.
Okay. Any other questions? Taha, you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Just I want to know, let's say I have a bad relation with some relative, and I try to change my lens and to, imagine or whatever that I have a better relation. Just I want to know, it doesn't mean to interfere in others' consciousness?
Right. That's correct. You don't need to interfere. Think of it as just it's something you need to change your lens. And I've had this experience many times. I've been at work with somebody, and we've been at hitting each other, not getting along. Something was at odds, and for whatever reason it was, and I would just try to find a new lens for myself. In my case, I said I tried to see them as soul. And when I start to see them as soul, immediately I begin to feel differently about it. And then I would go back to work the next day, and literally the problem was gone. It wasn't there anymore. I mean, I've had that happen so many times that I've come to realize shifting your lens, changing your is exactly the best way of doing it. And you don't have to interfere with them at all. They actually feel it change. They may not notice it consciously, but you could just feel it's gone. Whatever was between you as a bad relationship is gone. It's actually, that's a shared experience.
Yeah, and asking inwardly, what do I need to learn from this person and this interaction? And I've been practicing that, and I'm finding it's really changing my relationship with people I'm having a challenge with. The fact is, I'm having a challenge with something inside of me, because everybody is a reflection, right? Just like in a dream, a lot of the people in our dreams are reflections of parts of us that we need to connect with and learn about. And disease. I mean, I had a relative who contracted breast cancer, and the whole purpose of the cancer was to teach her that she needs to let other people take care of her. She's always taking care of everyone else. And it was wearing her down, and it was closing her off. And when she understood that this had come into her life to get her to change her lens, get her to change the way she was interacting with others and open up and allow other people to do for her. And everything changed, everything changed. So yeah, very valuable lesson.
Mm.
Thank you. Bridget, how are you, Bridget?
Oh,
I am well, thank you for asking.
Great to see you.
Yes, good to see you. This is wonderful. My
Yeah.
question for Doug is this. You talked earlier, Doug, about when you're writing the character, you can't control the character. The character manifests and tells the story. What is it? What part of the lens or whatever that facilitates that? Because I am writing a book of it's like a autobiography or whatever. And this particular character, when I sit down and really focus, I'm not the one writing the story. I didn't say all those things.
right. Yeah, exactly. And you're asking, so what is it that causes that change when you're writing? And it comes down to the relationship you have with the character, especially in the world that the story is. So it's a relationship with the world that story is written in and the character itself. So when you realize you have a relationship with the character and it's a personal relationship, then it affects you, and the way you are affected affects the character. It goes back and forth like that. And, which is why as you write, the character evolves and it becomes more complete. It may maybe be a sketchy character, you might say, to begin with, but it becomes more real. It becomes more alive. It takes on a life of its own.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that brings up a really important point about if we want to shift and progress in any way, shape, or form in our lives, it's important to be like a method actor. You know how method actors, they get a part and they have this character they're going to play, and they live that character. They study that character, every nuance, every way that that character thinks and acts. And for the whole time they're filming, they're in character. And they are living life through the lens of that character, through the personality of that character. And what I found is that that works for us if we want to reach a higher state of consciousness, if we want to reach a higher state of skill in any particular area. You know, my greatest mentor always said, act as if you've already attained this, and then live your life from that consciousness of having already attained it. Be the method actor and act every day as if, hey, I've got this, you know. And that creates a change. It creates a shift in energy. It creates a change in us, and it creates a change in the fabric of reality to where we become that which we act as if, right? So, yeah, very cool stuff. Stan.
Hi. Wonderful.
Hey.
Wonderful discussion. I'm sorry I arrived late, but it's been very juicy. You know, I was struck, Doug, by your comment that everything happens in this world through relationships. That really, really got me because of the fact that, you know, I've had lots of relationships, and of course I continue to have relationships, but in terms of primary, you know, intimate partners, that type of thing, I've gone through a period of solitude that's lasted for years. And, you know, it's been difficult, I freely admit. And of course, I kind of know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear your understanding of what's the significance of, you know, a kind of a enforced solitude.
Yeah. Why did I choose this for myself? Why is this my story that I'm writing? You know, in a sense, yeah. It's a good question, and of course, my experience is that countless people have those kinds of experiences, but everyone's story is probably different in some way. You know, it's not like one answer for all these things. But for example, just to throw out some ideas, it's sometimes that we need to explore relationships at a different scale and a different realm, you might say, than the personal, physical relationships. Um, I've seen that quite often when, especially if you see people have a breakup of some kind, they needed to get away, in a sense. They had lost some part of themselves in the process, and they needed to expand. And sometimes those kinds of experiences you that are most satisfying in that time are experiences that enlarge your sense of self in other realms, not just the physical realm. You know, you'll see some of the people that I've met who are really good authors. They're writing these stories. They feel so, their life is so enriched by the stories that they're writing. So you think about that. So where is that coming from? It's not coming from the physical. They're writing about things that are coming from the inner. And by bringing that stuff into the outer, it's through a relationship on the inner that's happening.
Relationship with spirit in this case.
Well, or beings in the inner worlds that are also involved in that same work.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
Yeah. I mean, think of it more personally.
Yeah.
It's a lot more personal than you realize.
Yeah, I got that from the dialogue, and it's very enlightening to hear it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and meeting with people, opening up to meet with more people, both outwardly and inwardly, creates the connections outwardly and inwardly to find those people you are looking to have relationships with. You know, oftentimes we orbit in the same orbit, the same small group or the same small place, and then we look to see, well, why isn't that changing? But if we open up our orbit and we open that up physically, but then also inwardly, start meeting people inwardly, start asking to meet certain kinds of people inwardly, and use the imagination to create the connection and the relationships, then it manifests down into the physical.
What Doug was saying about the muses, I love that museum.
Yeah.
That, I mean, because every artist knows about muses,
Yep.
but this is a reality. You're talking about having a real dialogue with
Yeah.
Yep.
with an inner being, that's quite remarkable because, being inspired by a mystical muse is one thing, but having an actual relationship and a dialogue, that's quite remarkable.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, I've taken it further because I was so curious about what were these beings like. I wanted to find out more about them, and then I found out they live in a community of their own, which was surprising. But they often don't like it to become too personal because for most people it works the best if they just feeling inspired. Somebody's just feeling the
Yeah.
inspiration.
Well, I was struck by the fact that you said that they didn't show their face.
Yeah, yeah,
And that too is important and remarkable because
right.
that keeps it impersonal, and that's for some that's important. It's an important part of the experience.
Right, right, exactly. And I think that's what most artists experience is just a sense of inspiration or a source of it.
Right.
But there are actually beings there
Yeah, yeah.
that are involved in that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
And living life is an art, it's just like writing and painting and music. The way we live our life is an art, and being inspired by different muses can make it a richer experience. Catherine, you've been patient. How are you?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Oh, patient. I was hardly waiting at all. Anyway, I was reading before class a little bit of the beginning of your book, Doug. And you mentioned something about sometimes it takes dramatic events in your life to force a switch of the lens. And in the last hour or so, I was thinking, like, wow, the moment we're born and take our first breath, that's probably the most dramatic change we can have. Talk about facing the unknown. It's like blasting the unknown, and then we immediately start making relationships that very moment with
yeah,
with our surroundings. The light, I haven't seen the light before. Oh, what is that bright light? The sounds, all of it.
yeah, yeah,
Well, also I was thinking, okay, so as it prepares us for later rest of our life, how dramatic events still continue. I had something happen when I was like 52. I was fired from a job that I was very good at and I loved. And it sent me into a tailspin I could not get out of. I got my toolbox out, tried everything, nothing was working. And then all of a sudden, one day, a dramatic thing in my kitchen, I had a quote on my refrigerator, and I read that quote, and suddenly it was like, oh my God. And it was like I had the right questions to ask myself. I don't know where those came from. I honestly don't know. My objective mind, like you said, took a powder,
yeah,
and it was like I just said, what can I do to improve my life today? And then the very next question was, what do I have more than anything else right now? And without thinking, I went, time. I have time because I was out of a job. You know, I said, time. And then without thinking, I went, I'm going to learn how to drive. Oh my God. I can't believe I was 52 and still didn't know how to drive. I know it shocks a lot. Yes, and I was born in the United States. I know it shocks a lot of people. But I'll tell you, that was one of the biggest, fastest switches I've ever had because I went for weeks and weeks of being in the most horrible state of fear and anxiety. And then as soon as I said that about learning to drive, I just like immediately kicked into gear. I got a bus, went and got a temporary, and the bus even broke down, but nothing was stopping me. It was the first time I was on a computer, and I beat everybody else and was out of there. And then as soon as I got home, I called my sister, who worked Progressive car insurance, and I said, I want to get insurance because I'm learning to drive. And to make it even better, within a week, a friend of mine gave me his mom's car who had passed on. And it took me 6 months, but I learned so many things that were actual spiritual things. Like one of the things was like, they tell you, you got to avoid knocking down the cones, when you're backing up. Well, whoa, what a switch. This is just one of the things. It was like, don't think about not knocking them down. Think about how to maneuver when you oversteer. It was like, wow. And anyway, that whole journey, and I did get my license, but it took me from being a victim, to being the victor, because then I got it. And then on the road to see somebody on a 5-hour trip, as soon as I got my license, I thought I was going to die. So I had a third change, and I had a miracle happen that still blows my mind to this day. So I became a vehicle. And that took surrender. So that was a whole switch from being a victor. All three of those, the victim, victor, vehicle, were major shifts between each one that required, as you say, whole different skills and mindsets, or not even mindsets. That surrender thing at the end, when I thought I was going to die and fly off the cliff on Interstate 80, that was like, because I set out on that journey like, the hero who goes out, on his journey. That was me. I got my license. I'm going on a 5-hour trip to see someone. That was an important thing. That's another part of the story. But wow, it just blew my mind what happened. Yeah. So, but those three things, that I went through in such a short time. But yeah, I think we're prepared at birth. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Catherine.
Oh, you're welcome.
In a past episode of our podcast, we talked about transferable skills and also transferable confidence. And these are two things that I found really important. And that is, when you had a job and then you try to get a different job, the first thing they ask you is, what are your transferable skills, right? That you did in this job that we can transfer to that one. We all have an incredible amount of transferable skills, but what's also important is that we look at what is the transferable confidence that we can also bring into the new situation, rather than the fear of, I've never done this. But that's okay. But you've done this, and this, and you can transfer all of that over to this new experience, and it will help create momentum for you to move ahead and get the thing that you want. So it's important, that we know that we have all those things inside of us, but we have to change our perspective of, I can't do that thing, to, I can do all kinds of things,
Yeah. I went through an interesting, when I was in my early days, when I was trying to find what career I should be in or that sort of thing. I went and did a number of different things, and I discovered something that happened, and I began to talk with others who have been through similar things. I think this is a universal principle, and that is, I just did one thing really well. I still had doubts in myself about doing something else. If I learned to do two things really well, I had some more confidence. As soon as I was doing three things and I felt like I was doing this well, I felt like I could do anything. That totally changed. And I found a lot of other people went through the same experience. So, just learning, this is why the value, and they try to encourage us when you're young, because it is easier to learn when you're young. But, being able to play a musical instrument, or learning a different language or learning just a different skill, even if it's just for fun, it helps your sense of being able to do anything. It really makes a difference.
Virginia, hi.
Hi, thank you. I have a question. It intrigued me when you talked about in a relationship how this relationship can change, of course, each other, the lens, but others as well. So now I'm thinking, if I'm in a bad relationship, now I'm altering something, that I don't know about. So I'm just curious a little more information on that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting that the way when we have a good relationship, it affects others. We're usually largely unconscious about it, and you have to keep your eyes open to see how it affects others. And it does. But when you're now, the question is, what happens when you're in a bad relationship? Well, these are things that can also be valuable if we decide that we can change any relationship into a good relationship if both parties are interested. They just have to agree. If both parties say, we can make this relationship better. That's all it takes, is deciding that. And knowing each other is doing that, it just starts getting better. And but the other thing that's really important about good relationships is they depend on possibilities. Not the way things are now, but the possibilities. When you're interested in what more could happen, what new things might happen, what you might learn from being with each other, those possibilities are the things that move relationships. They're the life source of relationships. Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
it inspires other people, and you don't even notice it. You don't realize how it affects other people when you have that. It really does. It really touches other people. And when you have a family, it's the same thing. When you have a family that has everybody's different in the family, but we all agree it doesn't matter. In fact, the differences are good in a family. The differences are what keep us interested in each other. If we care for being a family, if you really care, you become interested in the differences. You learn from the differences. So, yeah.
Thank you, Virginia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Else? Just talking to the folks out on Facebook. If there's anyone on Facebook that has a question for Doug and you want to, we do actually have a couple here. Here we go. Does quantum mean that you can see through all lenses?
The thing that struck me about the quantum realm is that it's all about the second person lens. So it's all about relationships. And so, in a sense, I've come to understand that the subconscious, our unconscious, is also based on a second person lens. So, in a sense, it does help you learn anything. That's the lens that helps us learn new lenses. It's our subconscious. And how does it learn it? It learns by imagining it's in a relationship with this new thing. So, if, for example, let's say you decide to take up the piano. You want to learn piano, and you've never learned how to play the piano. You've seen other people play it, that sort of thing. But you decide to sit down. It doesn't feel like a relationship at first. In fact, a lot of the skills you need to learn is how to play the scales or how to, learn the chords or things like this. And it's just learning your body is learning how to do this. You're learning it with your body. So the relationship to begin with is with your body. And you decide, I'm going to learn with my body. And you say, body, are you with me? Are we on this together? And if you do it with your body, you'll be surprised at how much easier it becomes. And most skills are learned that we have to learn with our body to do it. But once it becomes, it's something you learn the skills, then it changes into a new thing. Now it's what you can express with it, what can come through in the music that you're playing. And you focus more on the music. It becomes more about the music and less about the skill. It happens because the skill becomes unconscious. It becomes something you just do automatically. And when you learn how that happens, and you go through that process of learning, that once you've learned the skill, then the music becomes everything. That teaches you things about all kinds of other things you can learn. It's helpful for anything, learning anything. Those little lessons you learn in one way, like from a piano lesson, is totally opens up your world in other unexpected way. And you see yourself differently. It's like yourself changes, you expand. Yeah. It's good questions. Lots of good questions here. Yeah. The other ideas that I talk about sometimes is when I'm relying on my subconscious for something, I imagine it's like being in the dark in a room. And how do you find your way out? You can't see anything. So what do? You do? You just start feeling your way around, and eventually you begin to learn where the room is and where the door is and all that stuff. It's just by feeling your way around. But the subconscious is putting it together. And you get to know it. One of the things I did with my grandchildren when they were growing up, I had heard and learned from somebody else who had tried this before, and I was interested how it worked. I would get the blindfold. They're twins, and so they were the same age, but I get blindfolds for them and put them at a young age, and I say, okay, now here's the reward. A bag of popcorn or something. We put it someplace. We show them where it is. We take them to another room. Then you put on your blindfolds. Find your way there. And when they started, they couldn't get anywhere. They getting stuck. They didn't know what they were doing. And then I say, okay, stop, take the blindfolds out. Now, do you see where you are? And they go, oh, okay, now let's try it again. And we did it. And after the third try, they started to figure out how to find their way. They could find their way. And that changed their confidence in themselves. Because for them, that's like being in a new world, what they were, being blindfolded. That's a new world. And they found their way. Eventually, they got so good at it, they come over, let's do it again. Let's do it again. They wanted to do that. And they would be right there. They could go. So I had to find harder places to put it. Now you have to go upstairs. Now you're going to, I'd show them where it was ahead of time, but they had to find it. They got so good at it. It was just easy. It became easy for them. Yeah.
Thank you. Sylvia, you've been patient. What's your question?
Not actually a question, two things. Well, not a direct question. First, this is utterly mind-blowing, astounding. I mean, it's opened all kinds of doors and avenues and insights and things to try. So thank you hugely. And the other thing, which was the aside, I was wanting to try to experience this on Facebook, but when I went to the page, I couldn't see where I should go to do that. Was it just the main front page and it would just open, or how does that work?
You would, to do it on Facebook, you'd need to be a Facebook friend of mine.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so if you just went to my Facebook page at 7 o'clock, then it would turn on and you would see a little live thing.
It would just appear. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for those of you who are Facebook friends of mine, this recording will be on my Facebook page for a week or so. Then I will be transferring over to my YouTube channel. I'm going to give you the address for my YouTube channel in a sec. You can go to that YouTube channel at any time to watch this interview, and then also all the past episodes of the podcast. So first, I wanted to give, again, Doug's websites, spiritualdialogues.com and lensesofperception.com. I just put that in the chat. And then I'm going to put my YouTube channel. That's my YouTube channel. Also, if you lose that link, if you go to YouTube and just put in Integrative Wellness and Development is the name of the podcast, Integrative Wellness and Development. It'll pop up and you'll be able to access the YouTube channel. You'll be able to see this interview, the past interview with Doug, probably over 250 podcasts I've done since 2020. Enjoy them and share that. And if you would like to be on my email list, I'm going to put that in the chat. If you just email me at your9steps.com, your9steps.com. Put that in the chat. If you do your 9 steps at gmail.com. your9steps@gmail.com. Send me an email at your9steps@gmail.com. I will put you in our email list. We do live shows twice a month, and you would get an email letting you know, the week prior to the show, what's going to be happening. It's also put it up on Facebook, and that way you'll know what's happening. I call it a pop-up podcast because I don't do it every week. I'm retired and I'm enjoying my new granddaughter, and I'm enjoying learning things that I want to learn. And I'm getting a little older, so I've got health things that I'm, putting attention on. But twice a month, you're going to get interviews like this. And I want to stress that this podcast, it's a lot of work to do these things, and very generous people like Doug who spend, all that time to come on here. This podcast is free. I do not charge for it. I do not have any sponsors that I have to worry about pleasing. I do the subjects I want when I want. But the most important thing you need to know is this podcast is for you. I do this because I love you all. I love you all so much. And I love sharing what I'm learning. And I love sharing the incredible people like Doug and other guests that you'll see on my YouTube channel. It's just the greatest honor I can find to share things that can contribute to having you live a happier life, a better life, a healthier life, a more conscious life. And that's why this podcast is here. That's why I do what I do. We're not affiliated with any other group, any other company, anybody. It's just me, and doing it because I love to do it and love to help and serve. So I hope that some of you will come back at future podcasts and join us and bring your questions. Doug, I want to thank you so much for everything you've shared, for coming back again a second time. More importantly, for all that you do for the world and all that you are. You've inspired me over the years. You've inspired many, many people. And, we can never say thank you enough to people who are as creative, courageous, and giving as you are, and the other folks that come on the show. So a great big thank you for myself and everyone who's here and who's been at the other interviews. Thanks for all you're doing. Thanks for all you are. And looking forward to, I know there's another book on the way soon. And when that happens, looking forward to having you come back and we talk about that Always anxious to learn from you. So, Doug, thank you. Everyone who's here tonight, thank you so much. You spent a lot of your time. You could have been doing other things. You were generous enough to share this time with us. You gave a gift to everyone here. And there's thousands of people who will watch this. We get 1,000, 1,500 people on Facebook over a week or two period. And then when it goes on the YouTube channel, hundreds and thousands of people over the years will come by. And everything you've said, everything you've asked, and everything you've exemplified, be it physically or vocally or just with your heart and your energy, will touch and inspire people. And if every day we can all look to work to learn something more, learn another way of bringing value to the world, grow a little bit each day, express our gratitude through service to someone else in whatever small way, it really, really matters. And it's really important to know you really matter. I have some people say, well, I'm retired, or I'm just this, or I'm just that. I don't have anything to offer. You have so much to offer, and you're giving so much to the world just by trying to open up your heart, open up your spirit, and just learn and be kind to other people, and share things that have worked for you. Share it with other people. It's a gift you give the world. And as Doug said, with our limited lenses, we don't always realize that there are an unlimited multitude of dimensions that happen simultaneously. And everything we think, say, and do filters through all of those dimensions. And so tonight you gave an incredible gift on a multi-dimensional level. Doug, you folks who've attended here tonight have given an immense gift that just keeps flowing out there into the field, into the universe. And remember that everything you think, say, do, feel, learn is a contribution to the whole. So thank you for your beautiful hearts. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your interest, your questions. Doug, thank you again. Love you all, and have a good night. Have a good week. Have a good life. And I really hope to see you again in another episode. So take care, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.